You know, Dr. Patel, sometimes I wonder if fear is just the tax we pay for being alive.
Fear isn't the tax. It's the landlord. It owns the property. Most people never even try to break the lease.
That's bleak.
Not bleak. True. And as Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Most of us don't even know who's really steering the wheel.
Imagine walking into a room that you've never entered before. The air is still, the lights dim. In the corner, there's a mirror, but as you step closer, you notice something unsettling. The reflection doesn't quite match you. Its smile is slightly too wide. Its eyes, watching you, not with malice, but with a knowing calm, as if it's been here all along. You step back, but the mirror stays. The reflection stays. And somewhere, deep in your gut, you realize you're not entirely alone in your own mind. Here's the truth. The greatest fear you have isn't death. It isn't failure. It isn't even pain. The greatest fear is yourself. Carl Jung called it a shadow, the part of you that holds all the things you refuse to acknowledge. Your secret desires, your hidden rage, your unspoken shame. And the cruel trick is, the more you pretend it's not there, the more it runs your life in the dark. This video isn't about abstract philosophy for the sake of sounding smart. It's about something far more dangerous. The invisible hand that pushes your decisions, shapes your relationships, and quietly scripts your future, while you believe you're in control. Right now, you think you're steering your life. You have reason for why you've chosen your career, why you love who you love, why you avoid what you avoid. But what if I told you many of those reasons are fabricated stories, convenient narratives you tell yourself to hide the real truth? And what if, beneath all of it, your real choices are made by a frightened, wounded part of you that you've never dared to look in the eye? Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." We live in a culture obsessed with the light, with positivity, confidence, and success. But here's the paradox. If you never face your own darkness, you can never truly be free. Because unexamined fear doesn't just sit quietly in the corner. It builds bars. And it turns your life into a prison so familiar, you forget you're locked inside. The shadow isn't evil in itself. It's simply everything you don't want to see. And just like a child left alone in the dark, it gets louder the longer you ignore it. You may think you've conquered fear because you avoid situations that trigger it. But avoidance is just obedience in disguise. You obey fear every time you don't speak up when you should. Every time you choose the safe path instead of the one that calls you. Every time you pretend you're okay when you're not. If you've ever wondered why certain patterns keep repeating in your life, why you date the same kind of person, sabotage the same opportunities, or keep falling back into the same bad habits, Jung's answer is simple and brutal. It's because you haven't met your shadow yet. You've mistaken it for fate. This isn't going to be a comfortable journey. You might hear things in this video that you want to dismiss, that you'll tell yourself don't apply to you. That's the shadow too. The part that deflects, denies, distracts. But if you stay with me, if you allow yourself to listen without running away, we might just find the root of the fear that's been ruling you. And when you see it clearly for the first time, you might realize something even more unsettling. It wasn't the monster under the bed you needed to be afraid of. It was the one living quietly inside your skin. Now that we've stepped into the dark hallway and caught a glimpse of the shadow, we have to ask a more uncomfortable question. If I've been ruled by fear, how exactly has it been making my decisions for me? The answer lies in a concept both deceptively simple and deeply disturbing. You're not avoiding your fears. You're orbiting them. Think about it. You don't choose a job just because you want it. You choose it because it feels safe, acceptable, respectable. You don't choose a partner just because you love them. You choose someone who won't awaken certain wounds you're terrified to feel again. Even your so-called spontaneous decisions often spring from the same soil, a reflex to avoid pain, embarrassment, rejection. That reflex is fear, not in the form of screaming panic, but in the form of invisible steering. Picture a young man, Daniel. On paper, he's successful, stable career, polite friends, well-decorated apartment. But every night, after brushing his teeth, He stares in the mirror just a second too long. There's a flicker of something in his eyes, something that says this isn't my life. He never pursued the creative career he dreamed of because at 19, someone told him it was too risky. He never confronted a toxic friendship because it was easier to smile and stay quiet. If you asked him why, he'd tell you he made practical choices. But the truth? Those choices were made by the version of him that was terrified to be wrong. Daniel doesn't feel fear every day, but fear designed his life. Jung's perspective here is mercilessly clear. The unconscious mind isn't just a vault of forgotten memories. It's an architect. It drafts the blueprint of your days using materials you don't remember giving it. Childhood humiliations, unhealed betrayals, quiet disappointments you buried years ago. Left unchecked, it doesn't just influence you, it becomes you. When we don't face our shadow, we start building our entire existence around not feeling certain feelings. And that's how fear becomes a ruler without ever raising its voice. You tell yourself you're not a risk taker, but that's just fear disguised as personality. You say you don't care what people think, but secretly, every decision you make is an attempt to control their opinion of you. You insist this is just who I am, but often, that's just who fear has allowed you to be. The tragedy is this. Fear doesn't have to shout to control you. It just has to whisper at the right moments. When you're about to step forward, it says, "Not now." When you're about to speak the truth, it says, "That's not safe." When you're about to open your heart, it says, "Remember last time." And you obey, not because you think you're afraid, but because you convince yourself you're being smart. Carl Jung believed that this is the exact reason people mistake fear for destiny. They make decisions based on what feels natural, not realizing that natural is just a long history of avoiding discomfort. And avoidance, over time, becomes a prison that feels like home. So here's the first hard truth of this journey. If you don't see your shadow, you will spend your life serving it. And it won't matter how many affirmations you say, how many motivational videos you watch, how many goals you write in your journal. If the fear beneath them stays untouched, it will repaint your plans to match its design. We've seen how fear can silently dictate your life, making decisions in your name. But here's the twist that most people never consider. Your shadow doesn't think it's hurting you. It thinks it's saving you. When you were younger, something happened that burned itself into your nervous system. Maybe it was a humiliation in front of classmates. Maybe a parent's cold disapproval. Maybe a betrayal you never saw coming. Your shadow, that hidden part of you, made a promise that day. It said, "I'll never let you go through that again." At first glance, that sounds noble. The shadow's job became simple. Scan the world for anything that even smells like that old pain and keep you far away from it. The problem? Its methods are brutal. It doesn't distinguish between actual danger and opportunities that just feel dangerous. So the same instinct that once protected you from harm now stops you from growth. A woman named Claire. She once shared an idea in a meeting and it was mocked. The shadow took note. Speaking up equals danger. 10 years later, Claire is competent, capable, and silent. She never volunteers ideas unless asked directly. Her career moves slowly, not because she lacks skill, but because her shadow is still guarding the gates against an enemy that no longer exists. Jung's insight here cuts deep. The shadow's protection comes at a cost. It trades away your future to keep your past unchallenged. And because it operates in the unconscious, you rarely see it happening. You just feel an inexplicable resistance, a quiet no inside, and you obey without question. What most people don't realize is that fear, in its most destructive form, isn't the loud panic attack or the racing heart. It's the comfortable, reasonable hesitation. The "I'll do it later." The "that's not me." The "I'm not ready yet." These sound like wisdom. They sound like maturity. But many times, they're just a shadow fulfilling its old vow. Never again. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Your shadow would rather see you small and safe than big and exposed. It doesn't care if you're unfulfilled. It only cares that you're untouched by the pain it remembers. And so it locks you in. Not because it hates you, but because it loves you in the most misguided way possible. This is why fighting your shadow doesn't work. If you see it as a villain to destroy, you'll miss the fact that it's acting out of loyalty. It's guarding an outdated map of the world. It's still steering based on a wound you've already outgrown. The key isn't to kill the shadow. The key is to meet it, to talk to it, to update its understanding of who you are now. Because if you can convince the shadow that the danger is past, that you're no longer the helpless child it once swore to protect, then the same energy it once used to hold you back can be redirected to push you forward. And that's when things start to change. Up to now, we've talked about your shadow, the private, personal fears born from your own past. But Jung warned that not all the shadows we carry belong to us. Some are older than your name, older than your family, older than your country. They're inherited, passed down through culture, religion, bloodlines, and unspoken rules you never agreed to but still follow. Think about the beliefs you grew up with. Not just explicit ones, but the ones beneath the surface. The ones that say, people like us don't do that. It's better to be quiet than cause trouble. Safety comes before everything else. These aren't just words. They're blueprints. Invisible scripts that were handed to you long before you could question them. Jung called this a collective unconscious, a vast psychological inheritance of patterns, fears, and instincts shared by entire groups of people. It's why you can grow up in a stable home, but still inherit the anxieties of parents who lived through scarcity. It's why you can fear failure even if you've never actually failed in a meaningful way, because the shadow remembers the failures of those who came before you. A man named Elias. His parents grew up in poverty, constantly scrambling to survive. Elias, on the other hand, has a stable, well-paying job. Yet he hoards money obsessively, refuses to take any financial risks, and feels guilt when he spends on himself. This isn't his fear. It's the echo of theirs still alive, still whispering. It could all vanish tomorrow. The collective shadow is powerful because it wears the mask of truth. It's not just your inner voice saying, don't do that. It's the weight of generations behind it. And that makes it harder to challenge. After all, how do you rebel against something that feels like a law of nature? Here's the problem. When you carry a fear that isn't yours, you don't just obey it. You pass it on. You repeat the same warnings to your children, your friends, your community. You create the same limits for them that were created for you. Not because you want to hold them back, but because you believe you're keeping them safe. And so the shadow survives. Generation after generation. Jung's warning was clear. If you don't examine these inherited fears, they'll run your life as if they were your own, and you'll never even know they didn't belong to you in the first place. The irony? Many of these collective fears are based on realities that no longer exist. Your ancestors may have needed to be silent to survive. They may have needed to stay small, to avoid risk, to distrust outsiders. But you are living in a different world, yet playing by their rules. The moment you start questioning these inherited shadows, something shifts. You begin to see which fears are actually yours, and which are ghosts you've been carrying without knowing it. And when you put down the ones that don't belong to you, the weight you've been dragging for years suddenly feels lighter. We've traced the shadow's movements, how it shapes your choices, how it thinks it's protecting you, how it even carries the voices of generations. But understanding the shadow isn't the same as meeting it. There comes a moment, and you'll know when it's here, when you have to turn toward it. And that's when the real fear begins. Confronting the shadow is not some poetic metaphor. It's the moment you drop all the excuses. It's when the stories you've been telling yourself, the safe, reasonable, logical explanations, start to crumble and the raw truth steps forward. Jung warned that this moment can feel like a psychological death, because in a way it is. You're not just confronting fear, you're confronting the identity you built around avoiding it. Picture someone standing at the edge of a cliff. They've been here before, always turning back. But this time, something inside says, enough. They take a step forward, not knowing if the ground will hold, and in that step, every voice a warning, every ghost in the past, every old wound screams at them to stop. That scream? That's the shadow's last attempt to keep control. This is why most people never do it. Because when you face the shadow, it doesn't greet you politely. It brings out everything you've tried to bury: shame, guilt, grief, rage. It will remind you of every failure, every betrayal, every moment you've hated yourself. And if you don't expect that, you'll run. But here's the key. The shadow's attack is not a sign you're in danger. It's a sign you're finally in the right place. Because only when you step directly into the territory it's been guarding will it reveal its full power. Jung's words here land like a hammer. The meeting with oneself is, at first, the meeting with one's own shadow. It's not about defeating it. It's about recognition. Looking at the part of you you've called weak or wrong and saying, I see you. In that moment, the shadow's purpose changes. It no longer needs to hold you back because it knows you're strong enough to face what it's been protecting you from. It becomes less of a jailer and more of an ally. This confrontation isn't loud. It's quiet, almost sacred. You realize a monster in the dark was never a monster. It was you, waiting to be acknowledged. And this leads us to the final truth of this journey. Once you met your shadow, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to living by fear's rules. But you also can't stay in the confrontation forever. You have to walk back into the world and live differently. We began in the dark, a shadow in the corner of the mind. We saw how it quietly shapes your choices, how it hides behind a mask of safety, how it carries not only your wounds, but the wounds of those who came before you. We followed you to the edge, where you faced it not as an enemy, but as a part of yourself that has been waiting for you. And now you know, the fear that rules you isn't out there. It never was. It's been in the mirror the whole time. It's the hesitation before you speak your truth. It's the urge to shrink when you should stand tall. It's the quiet not now that's stolen years from your life. But here's the final truth Jung would have you face. You cannot destroy the shadow, and you shouldn't, because the shadow is your teacher. It knows where you've been hurt, and it will keep showing you until you choose to heal. This is your choice now, to keep pretending the shadow isn't there, or to walk with it, letting it guide you, not into fear, but into wholeness. So, I'll leave you with this question. When the shadow whispers to you tonight, will you obey it? Or will you turn toward it, meet its eyes, and finally say, I see you? If this journey spoke to something in you, don't just click away. Sit with it. Write about it. Ask yourself where fear still holds a pen in your life story, and whether it's time to take it back. And if you want more of these explorations into the parts of ourselves we often avoid, you know where to find me.